it's a useful way to review the year ahead and to look at our plans. It's a pretty full agenda that we'll be talking about tomorrow. I don't expect it to be terribly rearward looking, but there will be some analysis of the 2011 election. But for the most part, we'll be putting the caucus to the very full work agenda that we have in front of us for 2012, particularly in the areas of welfare reform, the economic outlook, the rebuild of Christchurch, the mixed ownership model, and the direction that the government is taking. Caucuses will run from 10 o'clock tomorrow morning till 4:30. In terms of the rest of the week, I'm in Napier on Thursday, and on Friday, amongst other things, I'll be launching the China strategy in Auckland on Sunday, and Monday I'll be at Waitangi with the normal series of events that I have up there. As you know, I've just returned from Melbourne, where I met with Prime Minister Julia Gillard and 7 ministers who accompanied me with their Australian counterparts. This is only the second time that there's been a joint cabinet meeting between Australia and New Zealand. I think that proved to be very valuable. There are a lot of ministers that were new in their portfolio, so a great opportunity for them to exchange ideas with their counterparts. And it's worth pointing out that this is the only country in the world that Australia has this kind of relationship, and equally, of course, that's true from New Zealand's point of view. I think we came away with some useful things to work on. We launched a review of the Australia-New Zealand defence relationship. We agreed to accelerate the reciprocal sharing of criminal information history, announced a 6-month trial with Queensland aimed to improve access to criminal history checks for employment purposes. The Prime Minister and I also announced that we've asked our productivity commissions to conduct a joint study to identify options for further economic integration between our two countries. We announced we're lowering the age of eligibility for SmartGate from 18 to 16. We confirmed our commitment to see an end of whaling in the Southern Ocean, reaffirmed the need for Fiji to return to democracy and the rule of law as soon as possible. And of course, we're conscious of the fact that 2013 will be a very big year with the 30-year celebrations of CER, and 2015 will be a very big year, obviously, with the commemorations of Anzac. So that was, I think, a very, very successful weekend and an enjoyable one. So that's about it.
Maori Party are talking about leaving the coalition, and that's a concern for you?
Oh, look, I think everyone's getting a little bit ahead of themselves. I mean, let me just make a couple of comments there. Firstly, the government is totally committed to meeting its ongoing treaty obligations. What we are doing is going through a consultation process now of how that might all work. I mean, the government on a number of fronts, and these companies on a number of fronts, have entrenched obligations, if you like, their memorials on titles of a number of these companies, etc., etc. But what's true is that they're currently subject to Section 9 of the SOE Act, and because those companies will be coming out from under the SOE Act, then it wouldn't necessarily make sense for them to continue to be subject to Section 9 as it's prescribed in the law, because it's specific to the Crown. And of course, these will be companies that will have both Crown shareholders and private sector shareholders. So one possibility, and the government's pretty open-minded about this, is moving away under the new control of these companies, if you like, from general treaty legislation to specific treaty legislation, which would spell out that the obligations apply in terms of the treaty, as it logically should, to the Crown as a shareholder, but obviously not to a private sector shareholder. So there's a lot of discussion to be had, water to flow under the bridge. We'll go through that process, but I'm confident we'll work our way through that.
So the Maori Party, are they overreacting?
Well, my understanding is that the Finance Minister's had a discussion with them this afternoon. He's pointed out that this is potentially an option available. We are open-minded to finding a solution. I would point out Section 9 is largely symbolic. It's been in the law since it was established in 1986. The government can't find an example of where it's been used. The Crown, as I said earlier, is totally committed to its treaty obligations. They are well spelled out in the jurisprudence of a huge number of laws that operate that have an influence on these companies from the RMA down. And as I say, there's specific memorials on a lot of the titles of these companies. So it's just a matter of going through and working out a way to reflect that under the mixed ownership model, the only shareholder is not the Crown, it's a mixture by definition of shareholders.
Given it's not included in the confidence supply agreement with the Maori Party anyway, is there much of an obligation on your part to consult in detail with the Maori Party on this issue?
Well, there's a legal obligation to consult with Maori, and I think in terms of our wider relationship with the Maori Party, we would consult with them and take on board their views, as we will with other Maori interests over the course of the next few weeks. But you're right, there's no expectation that they will vote for mixed ownership legislation. In fact, they won't vote for it. But we understand their deeply held views in relation to the treaty, and we're working our way through. I think we can find a pathway that will satisfy everyone.
What does this
mean for the Atmosphere Act, Waitangi?
Well, it's going to be a topic of conversation, but whatever happens, it's going to be a topic of conversation across the country. I mean, it's important that we spell out what we're trying to achieve, but as I said, we can't leave, in my view, that very general treaty clause that's there, because it wouldn't make sense, because it binds the Crown, and for these companies, they'll no longer be solely Crown-owned companies. That's the problem.
Had the issue of Section 9 been raised earlier by officials in the lead up to the sales process?
Well, it's been raised with various people. I mean, ministers have been aware of that issue for some time. There was a brief discussion, I think, with the Maori Party at some point, and there's certainly been discussions with other Maori leaders that have come to see me. And it's an issue that we're all aware of. We're just working our way through it.
When was that issue raised with the Maori Party, and was it during the post-election talks?
I've got a feeling we did, but look, I might be wrong. I mean, just in general, we've been well and truly clear about their opposition to the mixed ownership model. And so, as I say, it's just a matter of making sure we can interpret the law sensibly. And the problem we've got is private sector companies and private sector shareholders in New Zealand are not subject to the treaty. The treaty binds the Crown and Maori. And so the Crown is not looking to discharge its obligations under the treaty, but we can't bind a private sector shareholder. So we just need to find a technical way through that.
So when you talk about having Contact Energy specific treaty legislation, you're talking about separate legislation for each of the SOEs, or a separate...
Well, however, because they're going to come out from the SOE Act, we'll have to work out how, what legislation is wrapped around in the specific legislation, and so we might have a specific clause for this.
So, Prime Minister...
And it would, from the sound of it, it might be putting treaty obligations on the private shareholders as well?
No, that's exactly the point. It won't put private sector obligations, or put treaty obligations on the private sector, and make it quite clear that the treaty obligations are there, but they're solely for the Crown.
But if the company is 51% owned by the Crown, surely the behaviour of that company must be dictated by the obligations on the Crown, not the private, since the Crown owns most of the company.
Well, for the most part, that company will be anyway, because of the various engagement that company has with aspects of New Zealand law. So when they look at the RMA, for instance, there's a treaty clause there. And as I said, to the best of our knowledge, Section 9 has never been used.
It was used in the Maori Council case to prevent the transfer of the state assets into SOE structures in the first place.
Yeah, 1986, when the SOE legislation was established, it was established as a general treaty clause. And my understanding at the time was that was the way we did those things, but as the years have gone by, we've moved to much more specific legislation.
In the Prime Minister, in the Maori Council case, it prevented the transfer of the assets into state-owned enterprises in the first place. So there was an injunction against the Crown from... I mean, is it possible that we could end up with this being taken straight to court?
No, not in our view. As I said, since the 1986 SOE legislation has been established, to the best of our knowledge, it's not been used.
And no matter what the Maori Party think or say, you're going to still get rid of the treaty clause, please?
Well, as I say, let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's a consultation process to go through, and the government's open-minded about how it might deal with that issue. What we are clear is that
so you might keep the clause?
Well, we can't put a treaty clause on private sector shareholders. So we need to find a way, potentially, to make sure we continue to express what is a statement of fact, which is that the government intends to maintain its obligations under the treaty. And so it might be a specific clause.
Couldn't you put it into the constitution of the company and it could be binding on the shareholders?
But that would be binding a private sector company. We don't do that to future building.
So in a practical sense, how can you bind 51% of what the company is and does to treaty obligations and have 49% off here floating freely? I can see, say, financial obligations you might be able to do that, but in practical...
It's not. It's binding the government as the shareholder to honour its obligations under the treaty.
How seriously do you take the Maori Party's threats if they're not happy with the arrangement that you come up with?
Well, with all of these issues, there is always a process that you work through, and we'll continue to work through that process. I'm extremely confident that the Maori Party will remain part of the government over the course of the next 3 years. We'll continue to work our way through this, but as I say, we can't carry on the best of the information I have with a very general clause when you have a mixed ownership model. It just doesn't work.
Have
Do
you
you
got
think it's a
business
hidden
now
threat?
drawing up a proposed clause to deal with it?
Well, I'm simply saying that is one option. We'll be happy to go and discuss that with all of the people that we consult with, that we have this specific clause.
This must have been dealt with at the time of the sale of telecom and contact energy and other privatisations.
No, the trouble there was that they were 100% sold, and so the Crown was no longer a shareholder, so therefore they were caught by treaty.
So do you think this is just political posturing by the Maori Party?
No, look, I think, as I said earlier, I mean, to give the Maori Party credit, they feel very strongly about treaty issues, and the raison d'etre of the party is, as much as the foreshore and seabed, it's about their belief that of the place of the treaty in modern day New Zealand. They care deeply about the constitutional review that's been undertaken, and we may have disagreements actually about certain aspects of the treaty and its reach or its meaning. That's a debate for another day, but we're not looking to discharge our obligations under the treaty.
But you can't go, I mean, in the previous relationship that you had under the previous government, there was no instances of I can recall, of the Maori Party threatening to walk out. I mean, that's a pretty serious thing to be saying, and you can't go saying that sort of thing casually, can you?
Well, I'd have to see the transcript and understand the full context of that. So I'm not going to go and comment on something that I haven't had an opportunity to fully review. I suspect it might be a hypothetical answer to a question that could be proposed, or under certain circumstances. But my point would be there are lots of times where there's been debate and discussion. Sometimes it's gone the way of the Maori Party, there have been changes, other times it haven't. There was the same feeling around the Maori seats in the Auckland Council. There's been other examples where there's been concerns. We are different political parties, and we have a confidence and supply agreement which actively allows them to express their views, and they are doing that. In the final analysis, as I said, do I think this would be a deal breaker for the government? No. Do I think I'll find an elegant way through it? Yes.
The Maori Party say Māori are considering a hikoi, and that this could inflame tensions at Waitangi this weekend. Do you think perhaps you've underestimated the depth of concern?
No, I don't think we've had the consultation process yet. I mean, the ministers haven't even released that until tomorrow. So again, I just encourage everybody to look at what we're saying, recognise the practical issue that we face, and work with us to start to find a solution through this.
Is the real issue here that, the underlying issue that the relationship with the Maori Party this time has been poorly managed, and that they weren't given a heads up soon enough?
No, I think it's a work in progress, and they are simply stating their view that they would have concerns if they saw what they would perceive to be a reduction in the Crown's obligations when it comes to the treaty. Now, my point to them and to you and to anyone else that wants to listen is there is no reduction in the Crown's obligation when it comes to the treaty.
Did you give them any assurances that as companies that are majority owned by the Crown, that they would continue to honour their obligations to the treaty?
We've always made it clear that we intend to honour our obligations under the treaty. And as I say, there are lots of ways that occurs right through from the legislation that these companies are actively engaged in, right through to specific things that are quite unique to those companies, like the memorials on their titles which cover land access and all sorts of other things. What we haven't done yet is work out a solution for how the effect of Section 9 operates when you have a majority stake but not a 100% stake.
So would you expect those companies with 51-49 Crown and private ownership to honour the treaty? Basically, will the new legislation
the shareholder, the government shareholder is bound because the treaty binds the Crown with Maori, not private sector shareholders. So in an incredibly hypothetical example, you wouldn't want to get to a position where someone owns 5% of a mixed ownership company, sells it purely as a private sector transaction, and that's somehow subject to the treaty, because it can't be.
So what,
because it's not bound.
what happens when half of these companies are sold? There's an action, the private shareholders want to take an action that isn't consistent with the government's treaty obligations. What would happen then?
There's never, well, firstly, I think if you look at these companies, their record of actually engaging with Maori is very good. So, we've gone through that process to, ask the officials to look at it. My understanding is there aren't outstanding obligations, or there are lots of areas where they've engaged actively with Maori when it comes to water, when it comes to land access, it comes to a lot of different issues. So I'm confident that those companies will continue to honour their obligations and what they see as good business practice, because it's important. I don't think anything will change, because in the last, whatever it is, 25, 26 years, Section 9's never been used, even though it's been in the legislation that's covered.
Well,
so
arguably,
it hasn't been used in the last 26
Prime
years. It's not going to be used now.
Prime Minister, arguably the reason they've behaved so well is because they know that they're bound under Section 9 of the State-owned Enterprises Act.
Well, that might be true if they're bumping up against Section 9 all the time, but they don't.
And you also may have up to 10% foreign ownership in these companies. And what do they know about the treaty? I mean, those shareholders may be pushing up pretty hard against.
But as I say, it's important to understand what Section 9 does and says, and Section 9 binds the Crown.
Yeah, so you're saying the Crown will dominate in the relationship?
The Crown's going to be dominant, because it'll by definition own a majority share. But even if you put Section 9 and applied that general provision to these mixed ownership companies, it wouldn't be legally intelligent, because it would be binding the Crown, but not binding, in my reading of it, I'm not a lawyer, the private sector shareholders. So we just need to address that issue.
Well, the question is, does it bind the board? Does it bind the directors? Do they have to act in the interest of shareholders, or in the interest of the shareholders plus the Treaty of Waitangi?
Well, they act in the interest of shareholders. Under those shareholders, the majority shareholder will be the Crown. The Crown's bound by the treaty.
But they will have an influence, though, won't it, on private shareholders, and I wonder whether that will strengthen the view that it should be New Zealand shareholders first, because possibly it could be a disincentive for the overseas shareholders who don't understand the treaty investment.
Well, the practicality of it is Section 9 in the day-to-day running of these companies has proven over the last 26 years not to be relevant, because that's not the issue that's driving their behaviour. What is driving their behaviour is the treaty and the obligations that are enshrined in legislation that those companies actively engage in. None of that changes.
But it might become relevant, because the private sector shareholders might want to take an action that the government, as half owner, couldn't back because of the shackles of the treaty.
Well, you're getting into a hypothetical where I go around and around.
But it's going to happen, though.
Well, it hasn't happened in 26 years that we've ever
But these
run up
companies aren't
against
half owned yet by the private sector.
Yeah, and if you go and have a look at a 100% private sector owned company like Contact, it deals with all of these issues today, because it also deals with the RMA and all of the other legislation that has treaty provisions in them, as other companies do. That's the point.
Prime Minister,
the treaty obligations are expressed in principle and in practice through that legislation.
have these companies actually told you that it's not relevant in their day-to-day operations?
Well, I've asked for advice on when Section 9 has applied to these companies.
Well, we know that it applied on their. Well, we know that it applied on their formation. Like in the formation of these companies, they were acutely aware of the existence of these provisions because they prevented their formation at all.
And we've been through that, which is, as I said, Geoffrey Palmer, when he established it in 1986, the SOE Act legislation put in place a general provision. Over recent times, the Crown has actively moved to more specific.
But I mean, the fact that a provision is not being contested because a Crown entity is not breaking it doesn't mean that it's not being observed by the Crown entity.
Well, it hasn't been used.
Labour's question whether the social responsibility clause, I think it's clause 4, Section 4, will also not be transferred across to the new legislation as well.
I can't comment on that. I haven't looked at that issue.
What do you think of Alan Bollard's decision to step down?
Well, I mean, firstly, I think you congratulate him on doing a great job in the last 10 years. I think he's been a very good governor. He's applied the Act with great acumen, and I think he's had a good sense of the New Zealand economy, and for the most part, pretty right. No one's ever going to be perfect. He seemed to work off historical data and make forward-looking decisions. I'm not surprised he's stepping down. He's had 10 years in the job. Challenge for the government now is to find an adequate replacement.
Do you think there could be changes to how the Reserve Bank works now? Because there'll be a new policy targets agreement signed with the new governor, and there's also talk perhaps of a monetary policy committee, so not just the governor setting the rate, but maybe 6. What would you think about that?
Firstly, you know, I guess, you know, ultimately when you sign the new agreement, you're right, that's a matter between the Governor and the Minister of Finance. I haven't had any discussions or advice from the Minister of Finance that he's looking to move away from a situation where a single and unilateral decision is made by the Governor of the day on the advice of others to a committee model. That was a recommendation, I think, in the 2001 review that was undertaken. Outside of that, I don't see tremendous change happening to the way monetary policy is managed in New Zealand. You know, I think for the most part we have world's best practice and it's served us pretty well. Again, it's not perfect, but it's the best system that we can see, and it's actually consistent with what pretty much most other countries do.
So you wouldn't see any material changes to the next PDA?
Well, I haven't had any discussions with the Minister of Finance about that. I can't rule out at the margins he might want to take the opportunity to have a quick look at that, but we had discussions prior to the 2011 election about that overall issue, and for the most part we're very comfortable it's working well.
Sorry, and your monetary policy at the election was unchanged?
It was unchanged, yeah. So look, I mean, you can take that matter up with Bill, and you know, maybe at the margins you might want to tweak something, but I wouldn't be expecting something.
Would you like to see him have more room on the inflation front, perhaps?
No. I mean, I think in the end, inflation undermines the values of those and the wealth of those that are on fixed incomes. It's a fool's paradise to think that you can have more inflation, we're all going to get richer. Actually, if you're on a fixed income, you're all going to get poorer.
So less inflation?
Yeah, but I mean, I think we're at the right place at the moment. I mean, for the most part, the governor's been, like most governors, either at or at the higher end of the band. I think the 1 to 3% band's about right. And having greater capacity for more inflation just eats away at the retirement savings of New Zealanders. It encourages the wrong behaviour, and I can't see rationale for it.
Ron Farfus also stepping down. Have you got anything to say about his contribution?
I want to thank him for doing such a wonderful job running a mixed ownership model company, and maybe there are other opportunities for him.
Do you think that that's his, you know, what do you think is his best contribution for his time within New Zealand?
Well, I think it's about the culture he's created in New Zealand. He's an engaging leader. He's wanted to bring that company with him. He's had an eye for innovation and creativity. I mean, this is a company that in the last 3 years, on 2 occasions, they've won the best airline of the world. He's delivered good results. I mean, historically, it's an industry that doesn't make money. And he's been very, I think, forward-looking, created a great brand and a great product. So, you know, obviously, from the government's point of view, we'd love it if he stayed, but we're not surprised that he's going. I mean, he indicated to me some time ago that he'd probably be looking for new challenges in the future.
Are you suggesting you would consider him for a senior role in one of these partially privatised state assets?
Well, at the moment we're not looking for anything. I'm just saying he's done a great job running a mixed ownership model.
Or a national candidate?
I don't think he wants to run for politics, but you'd have to ask him himself. But he's never raised the topic with me. In fact, any text messages I've had from him indicate that that's not where he wants to go.
And Dr. Boaz, not thinking of following in Dr. Brash's footsteps and becoming a National Party candidate as far as you know?
Not to the best of my knowledge, no.
Has the government been briefed on reports of this Kiwi being on this Norwegian ship and being impacted?
Yeah, I think the Minister of Foreign Affairs is going to make some comments about that later on this afternoon. I guess what we would say is that that's a sort of area where you need authority and authorisation to go, and we believe that Norwegian sailor doesn't have the right authority. Secondly, we're concerned about what safety provisions might be on the boat and the risk about the New Zealander that's on that boat. That's just sort of high level advice I have.
Do you know anything about the New Zealander who is on the boat?
I've got a feeling he's from Auckland, but yeah, I don't know a hell of a lot. I think he's in Auckland.
Has the government considered trying to get him off the boat?
I don't think we'll go that far, but the Minister of Foreign Affairs will have some comments to make this afternoon. I mean, look, in the end, people take their own risks, but I mean, it's a highly risky environment, and we would want to make sure that they do everything they can to preserve their safety.
Are you sure that this guy is there of his own free will and he's not effectively been abducted?
I don't think he's a hostage, but
well,
he should
the
tell you
captain's
something new.
reportedly said it was a mistake that he was on board.
Well, not an advice I've had, but ask the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Prime Minister, I just wondered what you thought was achieved out of the Russian Foreign Minister's visit.
Look, good visit. I mean, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, I think, said yesterday in the press that the relationship's at an all-time high. Look, this is a country where it's worth the long-term investment. The two-way trade between New Zealand and Russia is frankly peanuts at the moment, a couple of $100 million, large dairy products going into Russia. But like China, like India, it's got a big population, clearly not as big as those two, but a large population over time will get wealthier, integral player in Europe. So, I mean, from our point of view, this is about the long-term investment to try and get the FTA with them, and everything that I heard yesterday would indicate we're on track to do that.
Did he bring up the issue of the breakaway states at all?
Look, he didn't specifically raise that issue. Not with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, we didn't in my meeting. I mean, it was a very broad-ranging meeting. We asked him everything from Soria right down what he thought.
Can I just ask one about Kim.com, Kim Schmitz?
Yep.
There are a few constituents, a couple of constituents in your electorate who say they telephoned your electorate office, contacted your electorate office with concerns about him. And you've said, you've already on the record saying that the first you heard about him was when the Solicitor General briefed you.
Correct.
Are you at all concerned that none of those issues, because some of them are quite substantive, were passed through to you as the MP?
Well, I've asked my electoral agents about that. Their understanding was two people rang the office. I don't think they had the name of either of those people. One of the issues was about him driving his car allegedly too fast past horses. I think the other one was making too much noise, or they were concerned about something. In both instances, my electoral agent referred them to the police because they would be the authority that would take care of those issues, and then pass them on to me. Now, we get lots of calls into my office, every day, and I wouldn't expect them to ring me up and tell me about that.
So just reflecting on the overall case, I know I've covered some of this ground before, but are you at all surprised that you personally have never had this name, or you can't recall ever having his name come up? Given the wealth of the guy, the independent wealth of the guy, and his series of applications and 10 million investment already.
Well, I don't handle those things, so the law is quite clear about who has the legal responsibility to make those decisions. In the case of the immigration application for residency, that was handled by the officials, with a sort of heads up to the minister. But there's no particular reason why he would come to me, and he was just advised under the no surprises policy that the officials had made that decision. When it came to the Overseas Investment Act and the application of that, the Justice Minister and the Minister for Lands made that decision, and they, so again, no particular reason for them to reference to me. There'd be lots of those decisions that they make. So there'd be people buying lifestyle lots and partial releases and all sorts of things around the country that are referred them to me. In terms of him as an individual, what I was aware of was that there was a German. I actually thought he, frankly, this is what I knew. I thought he'd actually bought the property in Coatesville because I was aware of the property. I went through it once when it was in its construction, very early on in the piece. But I thought the owner of Crisco had actually sold it. So my understanding was it was owned by a German, but it was leased in some way.
The United States is looking to clamp down further on Iran. I mean, what's our position at the moment?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Well, we're not proposing any particular change. We're enforcing all of the UN sanctions when it comes to Iran, and legally we don't have the ability to put unilateral sanctions on, as I understand it. Our two-way trade with Iran is extremely small. It's last time I looked, it's in single digits. It might be 20 million or 2 million, but it's in that order. It's very low. We don't import oil from them, as I understand it. So, frankly, there's very little activity happening between Iran and New Zealand. I mean, I can't explain why Australia has slightly different rules. They must be able to have unilateral sanctions under the law, but the advice I have was that we can't do that. But we're observing all of the UN obligations.
Have you had any word back from your officials that you asked to look into that potential anomaly?
They're working on it, so I haven't had any advice yet. But what they have said to me, in the brief conversation I had with my head of DPMC over the weekend, is that it might be wider than this because there's actually a number of places where there might be tests, so they're now going to have a look at all the legislation.
Which would encompass what?
Well, I don't know, if you can give you all the details, just see the cursory glance of it has indicated lots of legislation that might be different tests. So we just need to look at the way
that's specifically good character tests?
Yeah, I think in a different way it's applied.
New Zealand and Australian Productivity Commission is going to be looking at getting the economies closer together. It's not a road to a common currency.
No, that's definitely off the table.
Right.
See what's happened in Europe.
How else can the economies come close?
Well, I think that's a challenge. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff that's been in there over the last 30 years. I mean, all the low-hanging fruit's gone. And a lot of things that we do or have done, well, Apple's, WTO's resolved that. Tasmania's a little slow, but we're getting there. So basically, I mean, my view of it is, the pretty easy stuff's actually been resolved. And a lot of it's good, often dry stuff that doesn't necessarily lead the front page of the newspaper, but is really important if you work in that industry. If you're a financial advisor, having mutual recognition in Australia and New Zealand is actually very important for your industry. We are looking for something in 2013 that would be significant enough to catch the attention of New Zealanders and Australians. We may not get that answer from the Productivity Commission.
What is it, sorry?
We'll keep looking. Well, we don't know yet.
So, but it's the hard.
Good idea.
You've done the easy stuff. You've got the hard stuff to come. What kind of stuff is the hard?
Well, that's what we're looking at. They're the things we might be able to just have a wait and see.
Any specific examples?
I won't speculate on today. I mean, we've literally sat down and said, look, let's find something if we can decent for 2013. But
Was the idea of a common border completely off the agenda?
It's not necessarily in the longer term. I mean, all of the technological advantages we have now allow us to make that process easier and easier. You're aware that we're obviously trialling that our calling GATA smart gate now, so you can actually go through both your exit and entry in one location. There's a capital cost if we roll that out further, but it's been hugely successful. Might add that New Zealanders have actually been better adopters of smart gate on a per capita basis, I think, than Australians. And it applies not just to Australia but other places. But the challenge only with, if you would go back to the days where we didn't have a passport, I mean, that was always technically possible. The only challenge is that on any trans-Tasman flight, there'll be a decent slate of people on that plane more often than not that are neither Australians or New Zealanders. And that's always been the challenge of making it a completely domestic experience.
So
other than New Zealanders done in the south
But isn't
duty
the whole
free.
basis that you set up a common system where both countries have confidence that whoever's coming in are facing the same checks, therefore...
And there are lots of things we're doing. I mean, electronically now we're starting to scan bags so that those images are there when you get there and the bags are cleared quicker and all of those sorts of things. There's lots of things we can do. So I mean, one option is obviously at the extreme, not as extreme end, but at the most easiest end would be what you have in Europe, where in the European Union basically an edge passport, and at the other end it would be, as it was in the past, SmartGate takes us somewhere in the middle. Maybe we can do a bit more. Let's look at that.
So this big announcement that you want in 2013, will it be on movement of people, or will it be
Literally,
investment?
your guess is as good as mine, because we sat down and said, let's try and come up with something for 2013, but normally government decision making is a bit more sophisticated than that, but at the moment we're in the exploratory phase, so I'm open to ideas. I'll send you a jellyfish or a chocolate fish.
You owe me a chocolate fish.
Jelly chocolate fish.
Still owe me a chocolate
It's been in Omaha, jellyfish. Is that it?
I've got one.
Okay, you've got one for the road, one jelly chocolate fish.
Landcorp's chief executive expressed concern this morning about the implications for other previous land sales if Michael Fay's successful with his judicial review application. Do you share those concerns about the precedent it might set?
I'm very reluctant to comment on that. I mean, it's before the courts. It's a sensitive issue. I think we should just let them make their decision on Friday. Overall, as I've said last week, my view is that the process is working pretty well. There are clearly some sales taking place with foreigners. I don't think that's an unhealthy situation, but I think it's a matter of getting that balance about right, and I think the balance is about right at the moment.
And David Parker has disputed that the ministers didn't have greater discretion to say no, because he says that the investment had to be over and above what would have happened anyway to get the box ticked. Not just a full investment.
Well, the way the process works is there are certain criteria that need to be met in the Overseas Investment Act. So the Overseas Investment Office set that criteria and say to the applicant, effectively, prove to us that you meet these tests. They are largely in Section 16, I think, and 18 of the law. The advice that they give the ministers, I've actually through that advice, but the advice that they give to the ministers is whether they meet, or in this case exceeded, those criteria. So if a minister is to say no, of course they can say no, but they have to give the grounds of why they're saying no. So they would have to say, the Overseas Investment Office has got this wrong, or we believe hasn't taken into consideration these extra factors. Now, my understanding was the ministers, when they looked at the advice they got from the Overseas Investment Office, couldn't find an area where they believed that the applicant hadn't met those conditions. So, as I said ad infinitum last week, you can't just say no because for political expediency it suits you. You actually have to give a reason, and then that party would have the right through the legal process to challenge that. And
some of those tests are subjective, though, like are you identifiable and substantial gains in New Zealand, benefit to New Zealand.
yeah, but I mean, they're investing a sizable amount of money. They have significant retail operations in China. They have wide-scale agri-businesses. These, as I think Chris Kelly said in the paper this morning, these farms are very run down. I mean, I personally had a number of people who've said to me they'd looked at those farms and they wouldn't buy them.
Sure, but what I'm saying is it's not outside the realm.
The point is these people are potentially, making significant investments. That's not for me. I'm not a farm valuer. It's not for me to judge. That's for them to make their own calls. But all I'm simply saying is it's not a political process. It's a legal process, and they're following that. The government, and any government of New Zealand, reserves the right to change the law, but you just can't say no because you're Chinese. Because if that's the way we're running foreign investment policy, it's going to be a very interesting way to run it.
But didn't Boris Williamson overread it a bit, saying that trying to blame Labour's, he called it Labour's free trade agreement with China?
No, I mean basically what happened was the application wasn't made through effectively the FTA. The threshold there is quite low, but what the application, the free trade agreement has is a most favoured nation status, and I think it's fair to say that effectively codifies the way that we'll operate, and on that basis, it's meeting the law.
Do you think it opens the door to a lot more of these sorts of large-scale sales offshore? More funding?
I don't overly think so. I mean, in a way, as I said, those options have always been there. So the test isn't what's possible. The test is, what has happened and could happen. So yes, China's an asset-rich country that has an obvious motivation for wanting to control food supply. I think we all acknowledge that. I think New Zealand's a country that, for the most part, wants to retain that productive base, but does want to work with other partners. I mean, the discussions I've had with the Chinese officials, and the same discussion I take to Beijing when I go and visit this year, is look, there's got to be ways that we can work together to actually move up the value curve, satisfy the demand that the Chinese nationals have, and in fact products that we can sell across Asia to the mutual benefit. We're a government that wants to make New Zealanders richer and give them better opportunities. We are also a country, whether we like it or not, that's currently capital strapped. So I don't think hocking off every farmer is the answer to that, but I don't think that's happening. And I think we just got to work constructively. If we want to make the boat go faster, we can't keep doing what we've been doing, because if we do, the boat will keep going at the speed it has. So let's think about some creative ways to do that, and I think that is happening. If you go and have a look at Bright, when they brought into Synlait, they actively invested, because they are the preeminent infant baby formula company in China, investment in exactly that, and how they can make more infant baby formula in New Zealand for a market that increasingly values food security. So this is a good news story for New Zealand. It's not a bad news story. I mean, China's our second largest market. It's growing exponentially. It's going to have hundreds of millions of people that are middle class income earners. My view is let's embrace that opportunity. I'm not saying sell every farm in New Zealand, never said that, and I don't think that will ever happen. If there becomes a run on land, government will go and have a look at it. But there isn't a run on land when one purchaser buys 16 farms.
If the ultimate decision is not a political decision, why are ministers involved at all then? Why not send to officials?
Because the law says that the ministers have the right to review that, and they do that. They go and see whether the law is adequately applied. And yes, there's a good character test and all of those things in the legislation, and yes, a minister might take a different view. I mean, ministers took a view about Kim.com's purchase of land. They didn't meet the good character test. But I'm simply saying, when it comes to this buyer, Shanghai Pension, the owner of that corporation, in our view, met the good character test. Now, we can go to court and say we don't think he does, but we're going to have to come up with some reasons. quite clearly the first bidders, Wang, whoever it was, we don't think would have met that test, and I'm quite comfortable even if the IO had said yes, ministers would have turned it down, and rightfully so.
Have you listened to the teapot tape there?
Sorry?
Have you listened to the teapot tape?
I looked a bit at the transcript, because someone sent me a transcript, I didn't actually read it, and I don't think it was bland anymore, I think it was boring. See you later.